Okay, I'm just gonna run this. Hey, what's up? I'm back. It's your boy Jefferson. This is vlog 2. It's gonna be part of vlog 2. This is the next project I'm gonna work on. It's gonna be very short. But yeah, I found another one of these using found again. But I found one of these, I think for like embroidery at Miscellany Thrift. Um, and I was really just attracted to like this clasp, and I think this is perfect. This is honestly what I wanted to do. The initial intention for your step I had was to put some kind of like clasp lock mechanism. I was thinking about this as a collection of photos from Europe, as like almost like this this journal or this like case, or like your travel like luggage, right? Like it's almost like this is that. So I wanted to play with that, but didn't end up working. But this would have been perfect, and I am gonna try to use it for this. This is like was a really fun project. Very impromptu. Um, I was meeting up with a friend. His name is Richard. He goes to Emily Carr as well, and yeah, we just had like an art making session, and it kind of was for what I am starting coining called BAD, which is Black Artists and Designers, as well as Black Art and Design. So it's kind of my way of talking about the work I do, but not only me, but people that look like me, and kind of creating space by becoming visible almost. So we had one of those meetings, kind of just like I not exactly sure where that's gonna go long term. I'm still kind of like feeling it out. I'm trying to get everyone else's thoughts, but what I really enjoyed doing was making this like zine book kind of thing. I had a large piece of watercolor paper. I'm like, why not just make that into a book? And it almost became for me, because it ended up only just being me and Richard. There's maybe a couple of people that were going to say they're going to come, but it was only me and Richard. And for me, that kind of felt in some ways like an artist visit, a studio visit. So it was a lot of me listening and hearing what he had to say about his experience and learning more about him as an artist. And in some ways, this book was like almost then my reflection, right? I'm really in my class, my cohort, two designer artists that I really love their work, Quinshin and Yahan, and they both do this thing. They've started doing this thing where they respond, almost like journal their experiences by like sewing or like weaving or like kind of like using this like non-photographic image way, or like kind of like non-writing of way to like journal and document. And I thought that would be a really cool idea to do. And I guess in some ways I did this with this book, but basically that meeting with Richard and that kind of going and hanging out, this book was almost the kind of product of me responding to that. So then I'm thinking about doing this as a concept more about, I did a bunch of interviews this week, and I'm going to do a few next week for artists that I'm working with. And I did like notes or whatever, but I think for those interviews, I'm going to try to also respond in a similar way. But yeah, just quick design intention though for this is just to use this screwy thing to put on here to then kind of give it so it can shut. Yeah, I guess I'll just show the book. All right, let's keep you posted what comes up after. And we are back. Kinesthetics, Joma Studios, the vlog, Kinesthetics vlog. And so yes. Yeah, I wanna just finish the project, a little design sprint, I guess you can say. And kind of, wanted to just do the reflection now, just to kind of, you know, the whole process of designing and then iterating, but then you have to reflect. And what I like to say when it comes to reflection and design is that like reflection for a designer is rest for an athlete, right? In the sense that what really sticks with me with my time playing soccer and that whole journey I had, and maybe one day I'll get into that on this channel. But one thing yeah, it sticks with me. Obviously, it's like I don't play soccer, so I play pickup now. It's been really fun doing that, but I don't use the skills in that way. But some the transferable skills is a lot of the mentality and like the way I think about the world and think about practice and like kind of repetitions and whatnot. But also my health. I learned a lot about my health and the idea that when we did all these intense workouts and all that kind of training, the real gain didn't come when we're doing the workout, right? Of course, that's you need to do the workout to stress your body, but the real gains, the where you actually gain the strength is when in the rest, right? It's when your body's recovering is when it actually, develops these muscles. So in the same way for like a designer, it's equally as important for us to then and for me to recognize that yeah, you do the thing, you do the work, but what makes us designers and what actually I guess can take our practice to another level is the fact that we can reflect on it and kind of see what we did and kind of be more reflexive in our analysis. And I think that's where it comes in. Shout out to Bonnie for that word. But yeah, so basically the as I said before, the design intention was to more than anything was to like find a way to clasp this together, and I was inspired by like the found embroidery thing. And overall, I thought it was a pretty successful experiment. It's honestly exactly what I wanted in terms of like function. Um, you can just screw this out. And then yeah, like before. Um, so yeah, really happy in terms of that. But I guess yeah, a couple things that I did learn and I can like take away as a reflection on this process. And I guess maybe in a little sense this was a little bit too tight. Like I could have glued this one a little up higher just to give yeah, now it's like really, really against the paper, which yeah, I don't mind, about being like yeah, nitty gritty in terms of that kind of production wise. But in terms of reflection, in terms of what I learned from, I guess in some ways thinking about found as my material, and what I learned from like with working with found material, I think the biggest thing, I guess the biggest challenge with this project and the most difficulty was actually just getting the the clasp off of this part. Like there was like these screws and like the wood and my whole thing, and I was mentioning in my last vlog that I thought it was almost like wasteful in some ways if I were to like break apart a well-used thing at a thrift store just for a small piece of equipment, and in that sense not use what I broke apart, because I think someone else could have used that completed thing, but I'm just taking from one part, right? And same thing for this. I kind of thought the same mentality. It was like, okay, I want to use these screws or this kind of like clasp mechanism for my book, but I also don't want to break this, right? Because in one ways I could have just easily just like ripped, cut, broke, and made this like kind of dirtier. And I ended up having to kind of, if you can see right here, kind of having to break the wood, or I ended up breaking through me taking it out. But yeah, I tried my best to keep it as intact as possible, because right now I don't know exactly what I would use this for, but in my head it's like, okay, now I have this material that now can be changed and used in something else and repurposed, right? So that's like the whole kind of aspect here, this idea of like repurposing and that kind of practice. But then the second thing I had to like kind of come to terms with, and what I'm realizing with found, is that, again, I mentioned last time, is that what's nice about found is that it's free, or maybe not free, but it's at least it's made already, so you're not kind of like contributing to more to the waste and whatnot, and you're using what's already available. But in that sense of using for what's available, you're limited to what you can do, because you're kind of working with that material and what the properties are there, instead of maybe coming from, and maybe classically you think as a designer, what designers are is the fact that they can make all these bespoke products, right? But in some ways I'm kind of contending that maybe a designer also works with the material, right? And works with what's there instead of maybe with having to make new, right? But like by doing that, you kind of are forced to play with what the material allows you to. And I, one thing after like getting it out and putting it on, I realized that I needed to fold the metal, which wasn't too bad to do. It's like aluminum or something like this, so it's like pretty bendable. But then there were these kind of screws that weren't coming off as easy, right? And that was like giving me the most challenge when it came to taking it out of the wood thing. And for a while I was kind of trying to like bend it and fold it and rip it out, and really trying to struggle against what was available to me. And then I realized that, okay, you know what, like, I don't honestly mind the aesthetic. I like kind of squished them up to kind of give it more of like a kind of like broken feel, like really leaning into like what I was doing. And like I'm just gonna keep them on there, and like that's part of the look now, right? Because that's what the material is allowing me to do. And yeah, again, I could have struggled against it. And for me, all these prompts that I'm doing right now shouldn't take me like that long. So I didn't want to like. I was really spending, I thought, longer than I thought it would actually have taken me. Like this maybe took me maybe close to 45 an hour maybe. And a lot of it again was just struggling, maybe not an hour, but it was just struggling. And I think for me it's like, and again, maybe if it's a different project, when I have different expectations or there's a different person that I have expectations for, then maybe there's an aspect of, yeah, okay, you do struggle against that to get to that desired result. But for me, again, the practice found, I think, should be seen as maybe being more fluid and kind of going with the grain. And I want to reference Everyday Aesthetics by Yuriko Saito. And I think in one of the chapters, early chapters, she mentions how, um, yeah, it's like part of like when it comes to green aesthetics and green, like thinking about sustainability and like a role as designers in terms of designing sustainable things, but as also then thinking as the role as consumers or people that are also purchasing these things, is that it's almost like our expectations have been screwed up in terms of what we expect from a product, what we expect from the things that we get, right? And I think a prime example is that one of my, so I have a couple good friends, Bronte and Jay, they both work at FS and Franks in Gastown. And I remember like one video they posted, I think maybe even like the person who's not Frank, but like the one in Gastown is through like Velvet Underground and like that, I forget her name, but she's like the manager of that, whatever. And she was mentioning how people's expectations are screwed up because they see H&M tees are and they have a $5 t-shirt and like, oh, $5, that's great price. And then you go to a thrift store and this t-shirt's like 25, $30 and you're like, wait, what the heck is this? Like, I thought this was thrifted. But it's like people's mentality and people's kind of understanding that shirts should be that cheap is kind of screwed up, right? Because the fact that that shirt is $5 is because it's probably not made in the most ethical way, or it's not made in the most sustainable way, right? And it's like not only, okay, yeah, thrifting has to be seen as more, maybe finding, and it is, I think, seen as pretty cool, but yeah, finding different ways to communicate, like the work of classmate Natalie Gioviti talks about, like, yeah, how can you almost like in some ways make sustainable sexy, like that's what Tom says as well, but like making like these, like using communication design to kind of like using it for the causes like sustainability. And it's like, yes, 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 make it all that good and clean, but it's also then I think as individuals we have to also realize, come to terms with the fact that, okay, maybe and again, maybe if I bought a new piece of clasp and I could do one bespoke, maybe I wouldn't have necessarily chosen to have these there, right? And I would have maybe fought harder to get them off. But now that I'm coming from the perspective of found and also being open to like new possibilities, and I think that's what found allows you to do, because it allows you to kind of, in some ways you have to be more flexible in terms of what you kind of want at the end of something, right? And for me it's like, more than anything, I just wanted this to clasp and this to shut, and then the final look, I'm open to it. And now that I'm looking at this, and like it kind of like gives it now this new character, it gives it kind of like this kind of crushed look. It kind of almost, in some ways, I'm thinking about it, kind of speaks to like the kind of like the meeting I had with Richard, and like kind of the aspect of DIY and kind of do it yourself, and like even just the aspect of, and I can go on all this like kind of like BS tangent of what the crushed means, and I can like talk about that. So like maybe I will kind of think more even when I'm using found. But that's the thing too, because I don't want to over rationalize it, in the sense like literally these were made because I was trying to like, get them out first, and I had to squish them, but then I realized I can't get them out even through squishing them, and then I kind of just came to accept this as being part of the design. And now that I'm looking at it, it's like pretty cool. It gives it more of a rugged characteristic, which I think also, looking back in hindsight, speaks to the interview I had with Richard, or not the interview necessarily, but it speaks to that kind of conversation, that meetup, and even kind of like the rough raggedy, like in a sense of like me getting there, I felt like kind of rushed and kind of like I thought of something like no one came anyways. But like also like I had to like go through this I thought I got to the location, and like the map put me in this like weird route. I had to like walk through this like kind of like interesting looking forest that I wasn't quite sure of, and like this whole kind of journey kind of getting there. So like I think like that aesthetic kind of carries through to what I made here. Um, but yeah, so that was like kind of like all I wanted to kind of to show in terms of the results and kind of the reflections on using found. And I think the more and more I use it, the more I think those things will come clear. And how I have it positioned right now is that, like I said this last time, I don't know necessarily if like the DIY found is going to be a topic that I'm talking about per se, but more of like a method I choose to use. Um, and yeah, I'm still, and again, it's also like repurposeful, I guess maybe is more of like the overarching category more than found, more than DIY, or maybe it kind of takes both of those because repurposeful talks about repurposing something that's already been there and into a way that it's like increases the value, right? Um, and I don't know, in some ways, this kind of for me is like an artist book, right? Now, and I guess in some ways, if I position this as an artist book, this would increase the value of the book itself. Um, so yeah, there's like that aspect of like taking the old and making it into something new and kind of giving it that kind of, quality. But then there's also the repurposeful, and I guess it speaks to DIY because I don't know, I think there's an aspect of when you repurpose something, it's also like coming from, it's like also like that. And I guess there's 2 points I'm getting to that at, and one is that repurposeful can be seen as like an independent personal practice and journey where you um you yourself in your everyday like are finding ways to use things again, right? So I've been really on a bend on like anytime I buy I finish like something that comes in a glass jar, like no, I'm not throwing that glass jar out. I already paid for that glass jar, I'm going to use it again in ways that are valuable to me, right? Like for example, um I like finished a jam container or something like this, um and I was actually also in the same timeline frame, I was also needing an extra like kind of like toothbrush, toothpaste holder in my bathroom, right? Why would I go to the store and buy like even a $3-4 a cup to put in my bathroom when I already have a a glass jar that I already use that's honestly like the perfect fit for what I need, right? So it's these aspects of like, yeah, how can you repurpose? How can you like use again? Like why like it's honestly now for me it doesn't even make any sense for like why would anyone even buy something like that? Again, like maybe it's the expectation of wanting everything to be super clean and bespoke and like very like orderly, and I think maybe that's kind of like the withdrawals we're having from like the idea of like modernism and stuff like this. But I kind of like these spaces, and maybe it's just a personal preference, but I like how like my bathroom now I have like this jam jar in my bathroom. It doesn't really fit. It's not where you typically think about like a food thing, but now it's like kind of gives it this kind of color and this character. And even I had the suggestion, someone gave a suggestion that when I finish a peanut butter, I think Amelia told me this as well. But she was like, yeah, next time I finish like a peanut butter, I can use that in my bathroom as well. And now it's like in a way kind of playing on these found items and like putting them in a different context and like again repurposeful and like creating this extra value to these items. So there's that aspect of repurposeful, but then I can also see it from the sense of if it's like me and my practice and how I can help others with it. And in some ways, I don't know, if it's on a larger scale thing, maybe it's not necessarily, I don't know. I'm just thinking like DIY, like it works because that's like literally because the work I'm doing is just really work that not benefits me, but it's just my master's program. But like I'm trying to think grander and thinking of like if this was beyond the master's and I'm like doing this as part of my studio practice, Joma Studios, would this also be something that's DIY, or would it be something that I could outsource in terms of the found? I don't know. I think I also like DIY more than even as, because again, it's some ways a necessity for me, but it's also, I think, a valid way of living as well. Like, why am I spending more and doing more and kind of like, I don't know. It's just not, I feel like DIY in some ways maximizes the abilities and skills you have and like allows me to not spend money on things that I can do myself, or it allows me not only to not spend money, but then it also allows me to, I guess, change my relationship with things, or like the things I bought around me, and not seeing them as such like a consumable purchase, and like seeing them as something that can continue my life and be used in different ways, and kind of getting creative. Yeah, that's all I kind of wanted to say. Only other thing I would say is just a few tools I used. I didn't really use this knife, but what I say about this, also kind of thinking from the idea of found, and but more just like tools wise, and just kind of thinking about like the methods. I Yeah, I got this at Opus. No shade to Opus. I think it's a cool store. Got this at Opus. Forget how much. Like, but I saw the exact same one at Home Depot for like 30% cheaper. So just like as a reflection, just like even though Opus is an art store, I feel like for the practice I'm doing, I honestly can find all the things I need outside of like art specific context. So that's like one thing. This one tool came really helpful actually, and I use it the most. And this is one I got at the Vancouver flea market. Super cool place. A lot of secondhand items. And yeah, it was just cool. Just like I just used whatever I could, just like poke, to squeeze. And this was very helpful, just getting it out. And then of course the hot glue gun to adhese it. All right, peace.